Hello everyone, we're here to talk a little bit about the math class in Java and then talk about methods with return values. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the math class. In previous videos and programs we've used simple math commands like these: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus operator. But we know there are a lot of other math symbols and processes that we'd like to be able to do. For example, if I wanted to take 2 to the 5th power, I don't necessarily want to write down in my console 2 times 2 times 2. That'd be doing too much. And it's really not that easy to read. Thankfully, we have the math class that we can use, which, just like any other class, makes our lives a lot easier by having these predefined methods that we can use. So here's a few of them. We've got floor and ceiling to round up or down. We've got pow with 2 parameters that it takes, x to the power of y. There's a value, square root, round, random. There's a lot of them. There's more than even, which is right here, but this is kind of some basic ones. You don't have to import any extra libraries for this. They're included in the Java language, but they are part of what we call a math class. So let's see how some of this works. So I'm going to create a new class here, and let's call this one Practice Math. And I'm going to go ahead and open it, and let's do some editing here. I'm not going to need all of this, so I'm going to delete everything inside. And I'm going to go ahead and write my main method. Void main string. So right now, let's just do a system.out.print ln, and let's say we wanted to take 2 to the 5th power, like we talked about before. Before, we'd have to do 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. If I can get my shifts working, there we go. And then it would print that number. But if I use my math class, I can just access the math library by doing math.pow, and then our syntax had us take 2 and then comma 5 for the parameters, and that should output 2 to the 5th power. So I'm going to go ahead and compile this, as it doesn't understand something. System. Oh, forgot a parentheses. Alright, now let's try compiling it. Alright, more success. That's great. So now let's go ahead and try and run it. Back here. And sure enough, I get 32. Hopefully that's 2 to the 5th. That sounds right to me. Yes, it is. We're good. Alright, great. So that's kind of the basics behind the math method. I'd challenge you to try to use random here to write a function that returns a number between 0 and 20 and print it to the screen. I wrote down the challenge for you there, so this is something I'm asking you to do in your notes, to try to write a program. It is a little bit more mathematically tricky than maybe you would first think, given that random outputs a double, so a decimal between 0 and 1.0. So you might need to dig deep in some of that math challenge stuff to think about what that might look like. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about functions with return values. So, if I've got a function with a return value, let me start over. If we think about all of our functions we've had so far, they've been printing things to the screen and making images pop up, but sometimes we want to write methods that take in information and then outputs other information. We do this a ton in math or science. We might input the amount of nitrates in the soil and output how much fertilizer is needed. In math, we might input the number of seconds that have passed and how far a hot air balloon is above ground. So let the computer know that we want to return something. When we call a method, we need to let the computer know what we want to return. So this is going to cause this type of structure. So in the past, all of our methods have had a void here, like literally the word void, when we think about public static void main, the void tells us, hey, I'm not actually going to return anything. And maybe it was printing things out to the screen, but it wasn't returning any values. Here, in this function, I'm telling it, hey, I want to return something of type int when I run this program. Then we have the name of the program, which I could call whatever I want. This one is called times, as we'll see in a second, for obvious reasons. And then we have our parameters. So we have a parameter of type int num1 and num2 of type int as well. We're defining these parameters when we call the method. So right now it just is a spot holder, so the computer knows what information it's going to take in. Down here we have our return, which is our keyword that is going to return these two numbers multiplied together. So in summary, this method takes in two parameters of type integer and will return one integer. And we know it's an integer because of what we have going on over here. We're also going to take a look at how we could put this method in another class and then call this method in a different program. So I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call this one fun. And inside here, I'm just going to reposition it on the screen a tinge and delete everything inside, and we're going to add our main method. So public static, and we're not actually adding a main method this time. We're going to add a method that is going to return a type of int, and I'm going to call this one times. And like we had before, it's going to take two integers, one called num1, one called num2, and we're going to have it return our those two numbers multiplied together. Wonderful. Okay, so we have this method now inside our fun class. So I'm going to compile. It's saying I am missing something. Oh, that's what it is, space. Let's try that again. Compile, good. All right, and now I'm going to create a new class, which I'm going to use to call this times class. Or this fun class. I'm going to call this one doing math. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and open it up, resize the screen. And in here, we're going to run a main method this time. So public static void main string args. And then we've got system.out.println fun.times. So here I am getting my class fun, and I'm accessing the times method, and I'm going to give it those parameters again. So I'm going to do let's do 3, 5. And so now this function right here, this fun.times, is going to return 15, and then we're going to print that out to the screen. Let me make sure I get my closing bracket around my main method. And if all goes well, compile, no syntax errors, awesome. And I can see that math and fun doing math and fun are connected. And so now I can go ahead and run that program, and sure enough, my output is 15. We can also define our own methods inside a class and then evoke them within the same class. This keeps our main method a little bit cleaner. So for example, if I have doing math open, I could take a look at this guy and copy and paste this method into doing math, like that. So now I've got my method times, which returns an int, and it takes in two integers, and then returns the two integers multiplied together. Now, since I don't need to use my fun class, I can just call times and delete a nope, need that parenthesis still. I can call times, which is going to access this method, and then go ahead and perform that operation. So now let's compile. No syntax errors, still awesome. And close this guy out. Let's go ahead and run this program, and we're getting 15 again. So now I can just use math or the times method in the same class. Obviously, this is a little bit more on the simple side because we know we could just use the that operator, the asterisk, to multiply two things together. But it gives you an idea of how we can use methods with return values. Speaking of that, we're going to have you do a little bit of practice here. So now I'm asking you to try it out. So in the same document that you found this video, there's a program that is missing a Celsius to Fahrenheit method. In your notes, I'm asking you to write the code that should go into the space, and also make sure that you have a parameter that takes in a temperature at Celsius and then returns the same temperature in Fahrenheit. And you should also write this in your computer if you've got a computer with this on home. Otherwise, we'll talk about it in class tomorrow. Also, make sure it works. So one test case could be 100 degrees in Celsius, which should output 212 degrees in Fahrenheit. So give that a shot, and we'll talk about it tomorrow.